Welcome back to 19 Considerations. I was going to pick up today really from where we've been going since the beginning of this series, in light of some new information that's just coming out there in the media. And this follows on a little bit really from the previous video where I looked at what we might call institutional disingenuousness, particularly around the subject of building one's own health and immunity, and we look specifically, or at some specifics of vitamin C or ascorbic acid, which is a very readily available and can be added into your sort of daily routine, which will help to stimulate your own immunity, your innate immunity, which is your non-specific immune system, which deals obviously with viruses in general, but anything that's novel. The first line of defense is your innate or non-specific immune system. And this relates very much to what we're going to look at now quickly, and it's looking at two different studies, one out of Seoul, Korea, and one out of Shanghai, China. And basically the backbone of both stories is that there seems to be very poor antibody responses, or a variation of antibody response to infection with the novel coronavirus and the disease state COVID-19. So one of the early hopes, and I think anybody who knows anything about coronaviruses and virology in general, vain hope was that we were all going to get herd immunity. And yet it's well known and well established that antibody generation in response to coronaviruses is in general poor, and viruses in general. This is why you can catch or you can get infected by the same virus or family of viruses multiple times. And there is very little cross immunity. So if you'd been infected with SARS, the original SARS, that's been shown to give you no specific antibodies to COVID-19, even though the two are closely related in terms of both being coronaviruses. Yes, one does not confer immunity to the other. Anyway, so we're looking at researchers in Seoul have found several cases wherein patients who've recovered from COVID-19 have seen the disease reactivate, possibly because the virus is still lying dormant inside them and be reawakened somehow, which is interesting. And this is not uncommon with viruses. The cold sore virus, the shingles virus, these things stay in the body and often become reactivated when the immune system is depleted. You get a little bit of run down, you get a cold sore, or when in older populations particularly, they get run down, they get shingles, which is a very painful condition. And it's the immune system which holds this at bay. So, viruses may be resident at very low levels, and the depletion of the immune system then allows them to reactivate. And then the slightly larger study, I think it was 157 patients out of Shanghai. And the only caveat to this is that they may not have all been, some of the diagnosis may have been presumptive diagnosis based upon symptomatology as opposed to bloods. We don't know that. So all of the patients had recently recovered from mild symptoms of the disease, and most of those with low antibody levels were young. Let's see. The researchers said they were surprised to find the antibody titer value, that's the level or the quantity of antibodies, in about a third of the patients was less than 500, a level that might be too low to provide protection. About 30% of patients failed to develop high titers of neutralizing antibodies, or these are called NAbs, neutralizing antibodies, after COVID-19 infection. However, the disease duration of these patients compared to others was similar. Low amounts of antibodies could affect herd immunity, really, and resistance in general to the disease among the population. And they just finish off with a note about the vaccine as well, which obviously if you're not developing sufficient antibodies to the live wild virus, then the chances are that you're not going to develop sufficient antibody levels to a killed or attenuated virus version. So this is a bit of a, another stumbling block for this idea, this fantasy, honestly, is my belief at the moment, that we're somehow within 18 months or so going to have some marvellous vaccine produced by, some wonderful non-eugenicist like Bill Gates. So the absence, this highlights the absence of an exit strategy from this current lockdown. Now, whether these are going to be lifted and allow flare-ups are going to occur, and there's going to be this just continual lockdown on maybe regional or local levels. That's the way it seems like it looks like it's going to go. There is no clear exit strategy other than the fantasy of the vaccine, and that I suspect, will be continually kicked down the road. If we go back to the principles again of panacea, which is looking for this one bug, one drug, this vaccine way of dealing with this illness, and hygeia, which is the idea that you can strengthen your own innate immunity and just work on your health in general, that being the best and only line of defence that we have against this virus. So we're back to that dichotomy again, and the underappreciation of this hygeia approach. And really what we have at the moment, and this is a quote I heard the other day, it's a structural problem, and it was described as deadly structural nonsense. And this really is the situation we're in. There's this structural ineptitude and inability to see anything other than this large corporate government little diode way of thinking. The corporation promising the government, these corporations, we're going to produce this, we're going to produce that, and the government's then passing that on, and this continual merry-go-round between government and corporate board. The pharmaceutical companies and the governments are so enmeshed, and they're in this echo chamber, and there's very, very little information coming in from anywhere else, and it is a dangerous, a deadly structural nonsense that really is going on, and absolutely no exit strategy. So what I said last time is I would just very quickly go over some of the things that I'm doing, which I believe, obviously, are going to be helpful to bolster my own immunity, with the understanding that at some point or other, I'm going to come face to face with this virus. And what I intend to happen is, if I haven't already, is that this viral load will be, very quickly neutralized by the innate immune system within my body. So my plan through my supplementation and other work is to, if we use the term, upregulate the innate immune system, increase levels of circulating immune cells. It's a bit like the American military system, the DEFCON system, and as the DEFCON number changes as the level of threat increases. So what we want to do with the body is to stimulate and modulate the immune system. And so the means that I'm doing that, as I discussed last time, vitamin C, and I gave a bunch of evidence last time of how that helps elevate levels of natural killer cells and other immune factors. Zinc is also been very good in this regard, so keeping zinc levels up. Zinc's relatively easy to get in diet, so you might want to look at dietary sources of zinc. Elderberry has got a lot of evidence. It might sound like a bit of a crazy old hippie thing, but it has centuries, a millennia of use, as does the other sort of supplement that I'm using at the moment, which is a chaga mushroom. Both of them have millennia of use, so we know they're safe for use in population. Elderberry is great because it reduces the ability of the viral spike protein to bind to ACE2 proteins on the cell surfaces, and there's evidence that it compromises the lipid envelope. So the corona of the coronavirus is a lipid envelope with the RNA inside. It's an encapsulated virus in that way. And so, although not directly tested on this coronavirus currently, there is evidence from other viruses that elderberry has this ability to break that lipid layer and also to inhibit this ACE2 spike protein. So elderberry, very easy to take. You might find it as called sambucus, and come the autumn time it grows everywhere around here wild, so I'll certainly be making plenty of that. Chaga mushroom is an immunostimulator and an immunomodulator as well, which helps to stop one part of the immune system, let's say, moving rapidly ahead and let's say getting a very pro-inflammatory condition, leading towards this sort of cytokine storm idea. But it increases tumor necrosis factor gamma, interleukin 4, nitric oxide, reactive oxygen species, TNF alpha. But it balances this Th1, Th2 pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory cytokine system as well, and it regulates antigen-specific antibody production. So for my money, if I do come across this, I want to develop antibodies if I'm able to. And if I can modulate and get my antibody production up, and the chaga mushroom helps with that, then all well and good. And the sort of second line I'm coming in at is with using actually mild stressors. So I'm using something called vinstoxicum, which I take in a micro dose or a very, very tiny dose. Use a product to do that. So this is a product from Heal, Germany called Engestol, and that has the vinstoxicum, which again helps to upregulate, to stimulate the immune system just by imparting a little bit of stress, just enough, a little bit of stress, and that's a process called hormesis, which is this using small amounts of potentially slightly toxic or pro-inflammatory molecules or behaviors, which then upregulates for the short term the immune system. So Engestol, I supplement with that 2-3 times a day, and I'm also using my near infrared sauna. Again, that creates something called heat shock proteins. They increase levels of certain pro-inflammatory cytokines, and then there's a nice rebalancing anti-inflammatory cytokine release. So near infrared sauna has been known for a long, long time to be very good to dealing with systemic inflammation, but also by the reduction of these heat shock proteins, you're again just stressing slightly the body. So it's like exercising the immune system. If you think about it that way, this hormesis is like, it's just exercises, keeping that aspect of your immune system at a state of readiness whereby it's able to meet and hopefully destroy this viral load at the front end through macrophage activity, natural killer cell activity, and all those sorts of things. The vitamin C, as we said before, is very good at dampening down the nitric oxide reactive oxygen species. It's an antioxidant. Chaga also contains a lot of vitamin C, so although it can help to stimulate reactive oxygen species, it can also help to dampen it down. And this is one of the great things about using some of these natural products, particularly for the fungal products, fungi families. Their biology, their chemistry is very, very complex, and their biological effects are very, very far-reaching. And there's a lot of research being done at the moment. If you want to look into it more, you might want to check out someone like Paul Stamets, who's very much a public face of this research into mycobiology. And I will add a few little links at the bottom of this to the Engestol product, chaga mushroom, that sort of thing. And one final thing to think about is low-dose cytokine therapy. So this is something that's a little bit more specialist, but again, it's something that I've been working with for the last 10 years with my client base. And so in the possibility of a cytokine storm developing, then I have on hand something called anti-interleukin 1, which is a monoclonal antibody to interleukin 1, which interleukin 1 is the initial pro-inflammatory hormone that really kick-starts the inflammatory cascade. So that's something I would take. I would also take a couple of other different interleukins to dampen down the production of other pro-inflammatory cytokines, interleukin 6, interleukin 8, that sort of thing. But that would be in the event of an acute scenario, having not fought it off and developing this cytokine storm. I would look to calm that down very aggressively. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. Hope this is useful. Obviously, hit me up with any questions, and I will see you next time for the next consideration. Okay, take care then.